Hello, and welcome back to the Five Factors Podcast. This is episode 9, kids, and we're glad to have you along. It may be episode 1 for you, and if so, we want to welcome you and thank you for being here and invite you to go back and catch up on what you've missed. It's good listening, we believe. So, and when I say the word we, I say that because I'm not alone. I'm here with the legend and man celebrating his birthday week, Matt Adair. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm about to be a year older, based on the calendar.
Based on the calendar, you're about to be a year older, and
Yes.
celebrating this fantastic marking of time by doing what? You're here in Birmingham, Alabama, and what are you going to be doing?
Yeah, so I'll be in Birmingham, and so my birthday is October 28th. On the 26th,
Mark that down. Put that in your Facebook feed, kids.
Exactly. Send me all of the happy birthday notes and the text with the balloons, and just do that. It's a Saturday. I'll be doing nothing else, so just do
all
that.
Sent with the deepest of sincerity.
Yes, but on October 26th, I will be seeing Foo Fighters in concert in Birmingham, which will be a very interesting place to see Foo Fighters. That it seems like an interesting market for them to come into.
I will tell you, there've been many TV commercials.
Yeah,
pushing the Foo Fighters concert, and there's a bit of dissonance here as I watch a Foo Fighters concert commercial on local newscasts.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, they don't necessarily ring out Birmingham like if it was a Skynyrd concert, but it's going to be a good show because Dave Grohl and the boys, they do good work and they put on a great show, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
They do. Concrete and Gold, the latest Foo Fighters album.
Available at fine retailers, iTunes, and anywhere else. Future sponsor of the podcast, I don't know.
Future sponsor of the podcast,
Bring 'em.
Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
Because, look, let's just get down to brass tacks. All of us have some Foo in our lives occasionally, and it needs to be fought. And when you find that you have some Foo, we highly recommend the Foo Fighters. They're professionals, kids. It's not all of us that can fight it, but they do a remarkable job. Side note, I'm interested in the name Foo Fighters. I've always been interested in the name just because as a counselor, Foo is shorthand for family of origin issues. And let's be honest. Those guys have sat in the counselor's chair more than an hour. All right. And I don't mean that to belittle them because I think that's a strength. I think everybody ought to do that.
Sounds healthy.
And do that regularly. But I'm just wondering if if there was a genesis to that. I don't know. I've never read anything about them, about their name, how they came up with the name, but it makes great sense to me.
I'm pretty sure Dave Grohl just picked the most ridiculous name that came into his head for the band. I mean, he said on occasion, it's ridiculous that our band's name is Foo Fighters. So I think he just kind of pulled it out of the air. But sometimes the best ideas.
From my standpoint, it's genius because family of origin issues will dog you your entire life.
Counselors around the world should adopt Foo Fighters as their single favorite band. And by the way, and this is another side note, why have they not played a Super Bowl halftime show yet?
Because the people who organize the Super Bowl halftime show do not have what we like to call good taste in music more often than not. It's a travesty. Most of the halftime shows.
They are spectacles, Tal, and that is I leave that without editorial comment. Spectacles.
Yeah, spectacles and out of sync dancing sharks.
Are you talking about Ole Miss's defense?
Yes, and college football rears its head.
Boys
fantastic.
and girls, can you tell what kind of episode this is going to be today?
Yes, focused.
Locked in.
So let us transition and demonstrate the ability to focus. And you see how well I just did that. As someone
Segue.
rampant ADHD. This is my world. So step into it. The nightmare is yours. So today we're going to talk, though, about vocational health. We're going to focus on that. That is one of our 5 factors. And so vocational health is something that's I think it's easy to not pay a lot of attention to. It's easy just to kind of be like, I'm just, I go to work. But it's fraught with a lot of potential issues. But today we're really going to kind of focus in on, vocation and really kind of building your life as to where you want to go vocationally and how to do that. And so I'm going to tee Matt up here to talk about, what are your thoughts? 'Cause I know you thought a lot about this, about vocational health and just kind of how that relates into our role in God's mission.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that this is a pretty significant topic for me right now is that the church that I pastor here in Athens, Georgia, we're in the middle of a teaching series through the book of Nehemiah that's really focusing on vocational health and vocational development. And so, if I was to say 4 things that I would love for the people in our church to understand about vocational health and their role in God's mission, one, I would just love them to know that God is at work. I think it's one of the great presuppositions that we have in life is that there is a real God and He is very much on the move all around us, and in every single person that we come into contact with, whether they're Christian, non-Christian, that God is at work. Second, that God made us to work. That work is not a curse. Work is hard. Work is difficult, but work is good, and God made us to do that. And so we shouldn't run from it. We shouldn't be scared of it. We should embrace it because it's part of who we are, because who God made us to be. I love telling people that their work matters to God, that we have a lot of different people that do a lot of different kinds of work that listen to this podcast. And whatever you're doing, when you answer the question, what do you do for work? Whatever your answer is, whether that's a job, whether that's at home, whether that's in ministry, whether that's in the marketplace, like your work matters to God. And for a lot of reasons, but I think also understanding the fact that your work has the potential, it's created and designed by God to bring glory to Him. What an amazing opportunity that gives us, just day in and day out, to show up and have this ambition for the glory of God that carries over and should kind of just permeate the work that we do. And so that's, I think, what we're after here as we talk about this factor of healthy leadership connected to vocational health and talking about the right kind of ambition. I think that's where I'd want to just kind of land and have everybody know that that's what we're after here. God's at work, your work matters, and it's a great opportunity for you to glorify Him.
And when you say, when I hear people talk about, glorify God, we need to bring glory to God, it's easy to kind of just toss that off as a Christian statement that we just go, yes, I'll agree with that. But really bringing glory to God is, am I giving an accurate account of who He is with my life? And so with my work, am I glorifying God? Am I giving an accurate account as to who He really is? And that's how that circles back to God is working. God has made me to work. My work matters to God. And so I bring and give an accurate account of who He is by doing the work that He has me doing. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a little bit too, because that can get really confusing when we start to talk about calling. But when we're little kids, we don't think about it in terms of calling. We just, people ask us, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right. So when you were a little kid, when it was young little Matt Adair, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, so you got to visualize husky, deep and wide Matt Adair. First off, you gotta make sure you know that. That's just part of my story. But growing up, I wanted to pitch for the Chicago Cubs. Pretty sure I could have done better than the 2, 3, and 4 starters in the 1986 Chicago Cubs rotation. But, I grew up wanting to do that and just had different seasons of life. All the way, just little kid Matt, but all the way even into high school where, for a minute and a half thinking about politics. And I was a political science minor in college for a couple of years and had an accounting degree. There's just these different ideas, but it really is built on this idea of, if I'm going to build a great life, which is really what we're we're talking about today. I mean, how do you build a life that you love? I mean, I think every single one of us started off with thinking about what we wanted to be when we grew up. We get asked that question, right? Like it's the number one question that I think every college student that we interact with at the University of Georgia, every single one of them is like, so what are you going to do when you're out of school? Like, what are you going to be when you grow up? So that for me it took on different strains of that. I didn't want to be in the Air Force like my dad was, but yeah, there are just these different iterations and ideas for me. And what about for you?
I wanted to be when anyone asked me that question, quite honestly, as a kid, my answer was typically to find out what that person admired the most and say that.
Working that angle early.
Always. Like, what can I say that you will say, you're awesome? I mean, that was really my take on that. I mean, now if I was just flat honest, if I had just said, I want to do this, the answer to that would be, I wanted to be a rock star. I mean, that's all I want to do. I just want to do that, man. I just, stage, lights, guitars, and screaming people. Yeah, that sounds good.
Sounds great.
Yeah, that was my hope at that point. But all through school it would change, and and I don't know. You mentioned college. When I got to college, I don't know how many times I changed majors, and I don't know how many I've had in my life. Just numerous career changes. From international business and sales and marketing into ministry, into broadcasting, into therapy. So I mean, just what do you want me to be? Let me try that.
Yeah,
that has been a big part of my journey. But now I know. I came down to that place of no. What I do is I speak, I write, I counsel. Yeah. I do those three things. And then I had to try and find a way to go, okay, so where's the best vocational fit for that for me? How do I put myself in a slot where I'm doing those three things all day, every day?
Yeah. And I think that's just it's a little bit of a change of perspective that I think it is. I understand the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? But it assumes that what that should be on the front end, and that is something that you have to make a choice early on in order to get there. And we see this with some of the craziness that goes on in high school counseling offices and things like that. And it's like, if you don't know what you want to be by the time you're a sophomore in high school, you're just in trouble. You're screwed. And so I think a better way to think about it is more about who do you want to grow into? What do you want to grow into? And instead of just trying to figure out early on, is like, this is a journey. This is a process. And for some people, they're not going to find it when they're 17 years old. They might not find it when they're 27 years old. They may be in their 30s or 40s before that journey brings the kind of clarity about what I'm going to do with my life. But what's more important is really figuring out who am I, and who do I want to be, and who do I want to grow into.
Yeah, and you mentioned high school, and I know high school vocational counselors are out there doing their best and working really, really hard with a very challenging population. But here at the Prince House, my oldest was homecoming week. One of the dress up days was career day. So you're supposed to dress up as whatever career you wanted to have. Well, she was really stressed out about it. And, was not understanding, this is homecoming. It's stupid. Do whatever crap you want. I mean, astronaut, go.
That's great.
I want to be a Jedi, go.
Yeah.
But it was really stressing her out. And I had to tell her, no one's writing this down.
Yeah.
And you're not locking yourself to anything. And my college age clients that I have, that is one of the most single meaningful things I will ever say to them, is just to say, you're not locked. You're not making a permanent life decision that is irrevocable.
Yeah.
This is not that. It's not permanent. You can change.
Right.
And no one's going to hold you to, well, I majored in this, I've had young college students just start crying at the thought of being able to, have the flexibility and freedom to breathe in that.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things. There's dysfunctional beliefs about calling.
Yeah.
And it kind of starts around college, right? Because it's up and through high school is what do you want to be when you grow up? And
Right.
college, well, now we're getting on the track because now you got to, move in that direction. And so it starts to become more about vocation and calling than it does what do you want to be. So what are some dysfunctional beliefs that we have about calling?
Yeah, and I think this coming from a Christian perspective, that the idea of calling, this idea that basically God speaks, for some of us audibly, for some of us circumstantially, that God kind of puts his divine stamp on a particular line of work that we do or a particular job that we have. And I think that can become, first off, just confusing. For me, I very much believe in the idea of calling, but I believe it's more broad. I believe that it is more about who you are, how you're wired, your personality, some of the things that make you you. And then I believe out of that, there can be multiple assignments. And that's what we tend to think of as vocation. Those little assignments that can be our job. It can be within our family. We very much believe in a doctrine of vocation that includes marriage and parenting and things like that. But underneath all that, when we get into this idea about calling traditionally, which does tend to land on jobs and things like that, a few things that I see a lot. And again, this is my experience working with college students. This is in my experience as a leadership coach. And so I run into this a pretty good bit. Number one is the idea that my degree determines my career. And I see this early on when people are just kind of out of the gate getting started and they got a degree in this and they think they need to have a job in that field. But I also see it with men when they're hitting midlife crisis, that they basically got on a trajectory within a job because of what they went to school for, and they think that they begin to think this is who they are. And so even beginning to imagine that I should do something different is very, very difficult for them to overcome. So it's a dysfunctional belief that we would think that they have. I think the second one is that if I'm successful, I will be happy. You and I both have sat down with people who have been very, very successful. And this is even part of your story. I mean, in terms of the trappings of very real success based on the way the world defines that and finding happiness there. And so that's just I just see a lot of people unwilling to go where they believe that they should go in order to be the person that they want to be because of the success that they've already experienced. And it's scary to move away from that, right?
Oh man, yeah, it's terrifying, and you feel like you've got so much time invested.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, I know it's true for me to a degree, is there's a sense of kind of a dogged determination to not pull out of it because you don't want to geez, I might be 1 week away from like the one thing that was going to bust this whole thing wide open, or geez, it's a failure if I changed. And a lot of my clients really struggle at that level where it's like, but if I leave this, then that's admitting failure, or if it's, no matter what you do, if it's shutting a business down, if it's having to walk away from, a business or shut it down to transition or pivot to a different business or a different line of work, it's really easy to interpret that as failure and let that fear of failure keep you locked in to where you don't really fit. Or just no longer want to be.
Right.
And the whole notion of calling gets really muddled in there. We've talked about that. It's kind of it's like bringing the Holy Spirit to an argument. Well, I just know the Holy Spirit told me this. Yeah. Well, you can't. How can anyone argue with that?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And very often, I tell people this all the time. Well, I believe you when you say a spirit talked to you. I'm just not sure it's the Holy One.
Well, I would think even with, another dysfunctional belief about the idea that God called me to this job, it gets a little bit into what I said earlier about, where does God's calling actually land? But this is what I would say to somebody. It would be today, certainly. why does that mean tomorrow? And
Mhm.
so I think that there's a sense that God called me to this job and forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And
Mhm.
meanwhile, people are finding just high degrees of dissatisfaction. They're finding that they're not a good fit for the work, that
Mhm.
their life has evolved, what they want out of life has evolved. But they feel stuck in some ways, but they can't talk about
Mhm.
being stuck because I think God
Mm-mm.
put them there. So I think that's a dysfunctional belief as well.
I
And
I think
then,
that can, excuse me, that can
yeah, go
get
ahead.
tied in very easily to, because God called me here, this is going to be wildly successful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't dawn on a lot of us, God may well have called you to where you are so that you can fail,
Yeah. I
because
mean,
there's lesson in that, there's teaching in that. And that's where we grow. I mean, we don't grow in success, we grow through hard times and we grow through failure. And so it may be that God has called you to a place in order to fail, to set
yeah.
you up for something different later. But I just needed to say that right there, because that
Yeah,
jumped on me.
I was listening to an interview with Lecrae,
Hmm.
recording artist, and so his latest record is called "All Things Work Together," Romans 8:28, and
Hmm.
the woman who's interviewing it was a great interview. She said, I mean that comes with some significant providential pain. The
Hmm.
truth of that, and I think
Hmm.
we find that in our work as well, and yeah, so we always feel like it's if we hang in there a little bit while longer, God's going to hashtag bless us in all the ways that we expect to be blessed, not realizing that it may be a little bit different, and so what I find with people, man, I see this whether it's 5 years on a job, some people 25 years in a career, it's like they just feel like it's too late to change. I'm like, why?
Hmm.
I mean, there's still tomorrow, and if there are growing desires to do a different kind of work, to completely reframe the way that
Hmm.
you approach life and work and vocation, then why not there? So there may be some
Hmm.
of us who are in ministry that need to seriously consider moving out of ministry. There may be some of us who are in the marketplace that see what would be quote unquote ministry
Hmm.
opportunities that would be there. And so I think this whole idea of building the life that we love, we're not done yet if we're listening to this in
Hmm.
our 30s or 40s or whatever, or even older. I mean, it's you're not done yet. God, I think, works in different seasons
Right.
and opens up doors that maybe we weren't expecting.
Yeah, I went, to start a second master's degree at the age of 47.
Yeah.
But that was one of my hesitations, was like, man, I'm too freaking old
Yeah.
now to go back to school and get another master's degree. And talking with one of the faculty members, where I was, I mean, she said, well, do you plan on getting older? Which is a great question. And I was like, well, I mean, that's my plan. Yeah. And she
Yeah.
goes, well, so in 3 years, do you plan on being 3 years older? And I said, yeah. And she said, so you're going to do the time anyway, right?
Yeah.
So in 3 years, you'll be 50. And so you can be 50 and have another master's degree, or 50 and frustrated that you don't.
Right.
So it's never too late to shift gears.
No.
And so let's talk about, because, just for me in that process, it was a long, kind of drawn out thought process. In fact, it was really a 12-year
Right.
12-year
Yeah.
process, right? I mean, because when the inimitable Emory Langston Haygood had me in counseling class at Beeson Divinity School, he told me the very first semester, you don't need to be a pastor. You need to leave this program and go enroll and get a master's in counseling. That's what you
Yeah.
need to do. And I said, you're cute. Go someplace else. But he just chased me for 12 years.
Yeah.
And over that time, I thought and I thought and I thought and I thought, and I would just, I would get just paralyzed thinking about it until it just kind of was frustrating. Then I quit thinking about it. That's how I dealt with it. And I'm prone to that now. And what helps is to transition out of just kind of the mere thought process of it and start to go, okay, well, if I were going to do it, what would I need to do?
Yeah.
And start putting the pieces together. So let's talk about switching that mindset from thinking our way forward into building our way forward.
Yeah, so I've just found that for a lot of us, we think and think and think and think and think that, and there's not anything actionable.
Mhm.
So it's the old story of the old man who dies with regrets. You know, was thinking about
Mhm.
making a change for forever and just never did
Mhm.
anything with it. And so, what I want to do is really take some things that I've learned from two guys. Out in Stanford who have really done a great job with creating a design process for vocation. They work in the D school, the design school at Stanford. And, you know, one of the things I love about what they've done is the fact that they have taken all of their work with well over 1,000 students at Stanford University, and they've basically put it together into an easy to consume resource. And we'll link this up in the show notes, but it's a book
Mhm.
called Designing Your Life. And so Dave Evans and Bill Burnett are the guys that have been really, really helpful for me thinking about how you take design thinking, which is a kind of an engineering framework, and using it to basically help build the life that you were made to live. And so we don't see this, what I'm about to roll out here, as something that is disconnected from God's work in your life, his calling
Mhm.
on your life. But this is where the kind of top down divine calling basically comes into fruition in your life. And so this is how you join God in that work of helping you grow in those different areas. And so, yeah, so we have 5 particular steps that I think we need to take, 5 mindsets that help
Mhm.
you build the kind of life that you want to live, a life that you love, because it is getting closer and closer and closer to who you are and who you want to be. So the first one is this: we want to start by being curious. We want to start with exploring the possibilities and not taking ourselves and our life too seriously.
Mhm.
To just even imagine the craziest, most fun thing that you might want to do. I love when I'm working with people on this to basically say, okay, what's like the serious, taking everything into consideration next step? Like, this is the reality of stuff. But if you were to
Mhm.
do just like the wild, craziest thing that would be really fun that you would enjoy doing, what would that look like? I want that to be on the table, because what I find is that where people land and where they move towards is somewhere between the super serious, this is my reality, these
Mhm.
are all the kind of restrictions that are on my life, and then the wild, carefree thing over there, I usually find it's between there. So I love starting with curiosity instead of just assuming, well, nothing can change. So that's the first thing. You need to have the
Mhm.
mindset of just curiosity and
Yeah.
exploring. The
Mhm.
second thing is try stuff. Like, there needs to be a bias towards action. It might be small little actions. It might be volunteering, trying this out. It might be taking this wild, crazy idea that I want to do this and just testing the idea. But it's not sitting there talking and talking and talking and praying and praying and praying and thinking and thinking and thinking. It's a
Mhm.
bias towards action that isn't attached to a particular outcome.
Mhm.
So if you walk in going, I know where I want to end up already, where you've really undercut the process here.
Mhm.
That you need to be curious about possibilities, and you want to go try different things. And so for anyone in their 20s, and I tell this to men and women that I'm working with all the time in our church, interns and people that I just know, like, your 20s, you should try stuff. I don't know why you're getting locked into a particular career
Mhm.
already. You're still developing and growing and finding out what you did and what you want to do. I mean, the idea for me in my 20s that I would be doing what I'm doing now, I didn't have it on my radar screen. I had to kind of grow into that. But if I didn't try certain things,
Mhm.
if I didn't take certain micro risks, that I never would have been there. So I think you've got to be curious. You need to try stuff.
Mhm.
Third, you need to reframe the problem. When you think about the situation you're in, and really what we're talking to today, and if you are considering doing something different with your work,
Mhm.
if you're thinking about working somewhere else, working in a different field, if you are a parent maybe and you have kids that are in middle school, high school, college, we're trying to give you ways to help them as well. You want to reframe the problem. You're right in the middle of it. It's hard to see the forest for the trees. You need to be able to step back from the situation,
Mhm.
examine your biases. Biases about what you think success looks like. Bias about what you think that other people expect you to be or become or do.
Mhm.
And those, when you start really pressing on those things and reframing the issue, it opens up new possible solutions. Maybe new possible solutions about a career track, but basically it opens up new possible solutions about who you're growing into. It might be a different way to approach the job that you're already in, or a different way to be in the field that you're in.
Mhm.
And so I think we have to reframe that kind of constantly question, why is this reality for me? And at least make space for that in the middle of just kind of being curious, trying different things. You need to reframe the problem. The fourth one out of 5 is this: just know that it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there is an end goal to our work. I don't think it's retirement biblically.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there is like an end goal when I'm done vocationally, when I'm done working for the glory of God. My guess is if I'm breathing air, that's what I'm doing. I'm working with this ambition for the glory of God. So I let go of that end goal. I focus on the process and I see what happens next.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just getting locked in and going, this is the rest of my life. This is the next 20, 30, 40 years. What does tomorrow look like? What does this next season look like? And really just kind of embracing that process is there. And then the fifth one is this: ask for help. Use mentors.
Mm-hmm.
People that are in a field that you want to go into, people that you respect, people that are further down the road with you. It doesn't have to be formal. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. It can be people your own age. Like there's a lot of just kind of peer-based mentoring that happens. Build a team. Get 2, 3, 4 people around you who can help you through this process and ask a ton of questions. How do people see you? Like you're just basically trying to close the gap between perception and reality. You have blind spots. The person that knows you with the least amount of accuracy is you. That's the craziness about the brokenness that we find ourselves in because of original sin. Like we basically see ourselves through a house of mirrors. And so we need other people around us to do that. So that's kind of the mindset that we want to adopt in this kind of design process of building the life that we want to live, a life that we feel like we want to love. We want to be curious. We want to try stuff. We want to reframe the problem. We want to know and enjoy the process, embrace the process, and then finally we want to ask for help from others.
Reframing problems is, I probably spend a good 45% of my time with clients doing that.
Yeah.
And I say that just for you who are listening to think about, man, if reframing a problem seems like a challenge, or geez, I don't have a skill set to do that, or sometimes I just can't see.
It seems ambiguous, right? I mean, probably all 5 of those, it's a little bit like, okay, so what does that mean?
What is it? So that to if you need help, if it's just a dark place for you, you're just overwhelmed, there's too much, man, have a counselor and sit down and just have them walk you through and help you reframe things. A clean, easy example that fits what we're talking about is how many times have we seen, heard, or been that person who is really not happy at their work, not happy with who they're working for, not happy with who they're working with, and their spouse is not happy, with them, with you being in that place, or with this person being in that place, and just know they're unhappy. Well, that guy's that man or woman's gonna come into my office and just kind of start unloading about this person's a jerk, and that person's awful, and they're oppressive, and they don't understand, and this and that, and then and my spouse doesn't like me being there, and but this is what I do. Well, man, a great, quick, and easy reframe to all of that is, wow, that's exciting. It may be that God's pushing you out of there.
Yeah.
It may be that something new is on your horizon. It may be that this growing sense of discomfort is moving you out, and that there's something new and exciting out there, for you to explore. So now what was kind of an oppressive, hopeless place that ultimately is going to lead to despair, now shifts to opportunity and potential and hope, and that's the power of a simple reframe. That's not even a complicated one. That's just a real simple, quick shift, of thinking. And so reframing is really, really powerful. And something I love that you said about be curious and, and asking for help. Those two things together. What I tell young people all the time is, holy cow, you have the mystique of the student. And that will open doors for you like almost nothing else in the world.
Right.
If you call somebody that's doing the gig that you want, and say, I'm a student. And I'm very interested in your work and what you do, because I'm very interested in pursuing that myself as a career. Holy cow, they will sit down, because you know what everyone likes to talk about? They like to talk about themselves a whole lot.
Right.
And so if you want to hear from me about how much I love my job and how, and all, yes, come see me. And it's a great experience for all involved. But you have that, I think you can have it even not as a student, as someone who's interested in another line of work. You can call somebody that's doing what you're interested in or thinking about. And that's part of networking, and who knows, that may open doors for you. I got into an international business gig because I met the CEO of an international company at a cocktail party. I mean, that's it. And so he's asking me, he's like, so, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I just got out of, business school at Emory. And, and so I'm thinking about, I'd like to be in international business. And he said, what would you like to do in international business? And I said, well, your job looks pretty sweet. I probably need a couple. I said this to him with a straight face. I'd probably need a couple weeks of training, but after that, I think I could handle it. And he just thought that was the funniest thing ever.
Yeah.
And then that guy calls me a couple of days later and says, we don't have a management training program at this company, and we need to have one. We hadn't thought about really succession planning or management training, and we need to do that. I'd like you to be our first one. Are you available? And a week later, I was in Europe for 8 weeks,
right,
with a corporate Amex and a passport ready to roll.
Yeah.
So you just never know how those doors are going to open. But be curious, ask people that are doing what you're interested in doing, and get their read on it. And then, yes, use mentors, build a team, get people around you who know you. All that's just great stuff.
Yeah.
So how do we move as we go through that? How do we, from your perspective, end up with a life that we love?
Well, I think two things that I think I find particularly helpful because one is sort of counterintuitive, and because you're going to hear a lot of people talk about the role of passion and desire and doing what you love.
Mm-hmm.
I think a mistake is the idea that you should know what that is when you get started.
Mm-hmm.
There's this idea of, okay, so what do you want to do? Like, what are you passionate about? I don't know. Well, okay, we'll come back when you find that out. Well, I think a much more sane process, and that's kind of what we're after, is sanity, is discover that. You want to discover what you're passionate about, and it takes trying things. Like, it takes prototyping and experimenting and building and taking this job, taking that trip, trying this out. And that's just what I say. Instead of believing that you have to know that today, what can I do today to discover what I'm going to be passionate about tomorrow? That's the first thing. The second thing is, the life that you love is a life that's going to make sense to you. Mm-hmm. It's going to resonate with who you are. It's going to make sense in light of your entire life story. Mm-hmm. And God hasn't, there are no accidents in what God has done in shaping you into who you are. So when we talk about this kind of life, this shouldn't pigeonhole you into a life where you're like, I mean, this doesn't this is unfamiliar to me. This is, this doesn't fit me at all. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't mean we don't take challenges. It just means that the steps that you take should make sense. Mm-hmm. So this isn't a throw caution to the wind, just do a bunch of crazy stuff. If you love taking risks, then that makes sense for you. But if you don't like taking risks, moving forward should minimize those risks. Mm-hmm. So I've said in everything that I've ever started, I have never gone all in, burn the ships, burn all bridges, go in. I have always made incremental steps and taken micro risks because that's how I'm wired. And so those are the two things: discover your passion and build towards a life that makes sense to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's, that's part of the game. And I'm a fan of journaling, and, and so journaling through the process, if you're a journaler, if that works for you, man, that's a great tool to have in terms of just kind of continuing to gauge, am I enjoying where I am? Am I liking this? Because if you go back over the pages over the last months or years, and kind of see, how things are going, how, what kind of your emotional states are, what are, how are you feeling over that time. You're going to see if you're really happy where you are, but also to discover just kind of what are your micro skills and where you are. What made me a great salesperson is, and I'm an introvert. Okay. So in fact, for several years, I did the job least chosen by my personality type. Okay.
That sounds fun.
And I was great at it and miserable most of the time, because my approach was so different. Because your personality type doesn't pigeonhole you. It's not like, well, that's your type, so you can do one of these 3 careers. It's not that. You can do any career. It's just that your approach is going to be wildly different from everybody else. This is how we got wine in a box. You're welcome. I was part of that. Because I thought in ways that no one probably should. My approach was different. Everything about it was different. And I'd sit in sales trainings and I would just be miserable, sitting in a sales training atmosphere. I just would rather have a root canal with no Novocaine than do that ever, because my approach was so different. What they were saying to do was like, it's here's how to close and here's how to overcome objections. And you know how I sold? I counseled. That's what I did. I knew my clients' families. I knew their personal problems. I was just that guy that they would tell everything to. I was managing the West Coast, Canada, and Mexico when Teresa and I got married. And several of my customers flew from the West Coast to Roanoke, Virginia to be at our wedding.
Wow.
Customers don't do that. You know why they did that? Because I was their counselor.
Yeah.
We were close. We had a close relationship. It wasn't that I was a great salesperson.
Yeah.
I was a really good counselor. I just didn't realize that's what I was doing.
Yep.
And then I left international business, went to seminary because, well, okay. I can counsel more there, but I like to speak too. So that's preaching. Okay, cool. I'll do that. So that made sense. And I started a church for addicts. And so what was I doing most of the time? Counseling. And then I spoke once a week. And that was cool. So I'm like, yeah, this is good. But really, at the end of the day, Langston Haygood was correct. I'm as a pastor, I'm a really good therapist. But I'm so comfortable now knowing that. But it was a long journey of just kind of, okay, look, we're using this same skill set. We're just trying to get it to the right spot.
Right.
But I don't regret any of the days that led me to this day.
Right.
There were challenges and all that, absolutely. But, being able to stay flexible, stay curious, stay open, and not locked into, well, this is what I studied, I got to do this. And not staying locked into, well, I've been doing it for so long, I can't change. Yeah. To be able to follow, God's leading and be curious and to take incremental risks, is really, really powerful. And I think that's how we get there. But it's also really important for us to remember, because it's easy for us, easy for leaders, easy for everybody to wrap your identity around your vocation.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on that, Matt?
Well, what you do with your life does not define who you are. So when I think of this, I think of identity, calling, and assignment as 3 separate things. I think our assignments are the jobs that we have, the work that we do as parents, as spouses. I think our calling really is the broader framework that all of those assignments fit into, and it's why they make sense, because it's kind of it's the stuff that really does contribute to what makes me unique as an individual. But even then, that still doesn't define me ultimately. Ultimately, what defines me is my identity. And again, as Christians, we believe that my greatest hope in life and death is that I belong to Jesus. Mm-hmm. And if that's true, then that shapes my life. A life that I build, a life that I love, should be a life that is deeply rooted in that reality that I belong to Jesus. And so that means that there's a lot of freedom to take risks. There's a lot of freedom to make choices, to put boundaries and parameters around my life so that I don't always have to be chasing after the next rainbow. And so I think that that's where I want to make sure that when we talk about vocational design, vocational development, that we understand that we're not trying to basically make ourselves, that we're trying to basically help build a life in light of who we are at the most fundamental understanding of what it means to be a human being. We're created in the image of God, and the one who made us in that image loves us deeply, and we belong to him. And there's no better reality in the world than that.
Yeah, it's really helpful. I ask clients all the time. It's one of the first questions I ask a lot of clients is, who are you?
Yeah.
And
I don't know what to do with that question.
They will immediately go to vocation.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a salesman, or I'm a business owner.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's what you do.
Yeah.
Who are you? And I will sit here and drill that question at them for 30, 40 minutes. Until they just really get to the point of understanding of I don't know.
Yeah.
Other than what I do, I don't know how to define my identity.
Yeah.
And that's sad, but it's where a lot of us, I'm telling you, and I can identify because I was in my 40s and in rehab. Before I could answer that question. I went through the exact same process with a dude just hammering away at me. It was like, yeah, but who are you?
Yeah, because what we're saying is that our failure to understand our identity at the deepest level is very much impacts some of these other factors we talk about. It's why we're physically unhealthy, why we're relationally unhealthy, why we're spiritually and mentally unhealthy, is because we really struggle to be okay with the fact that in the end, who am I? I'm a human being created by God in his image, and by God's grace, I belong to him.
Yeah, and that's a real place of freedom. To get to there. So now, hopefully, your appetite is now stirring within you, and so this podcast, we're releasing this episode anyway, in late October. So we're getting up on that time of year where everybody's going to start talking about 2018, and we're gonna leaders are really big on this. We're like looking at next year and what's our horizon. A lot of you have probably already started your planning processes. And then there are those of you that are like me and going, yeah, I'll get to that. But so as we look at what's coming, 2018 is coming. So what are some suggestions, Matt, that we have for our listeners today in terms of how they look at 2018 and kind of this process of, all right, so let's build our life for 2018 with some intention around it?
Yeah, we created a free resource that anybody can go get at fivefactors.net/freedom. And basically, it's a very simple 3-part process to help you in 2017 well, and to build the life that you want to build in 2018, to find freedom in that. And it's a real simple process. We want to help you set a goal. We want to help you build some projects so you can make progress towards that goal. And then we want to help you lock those projects into your schedule so you can actually do them. So what I want you to do is I want you to go to fivefactors.net/freedom, download that. The very first thing you're going to see is a list of possible areas that you can set goals for. One of those is going to be on how to design your life. You're going to set a goal on designing your life, which is what we've been talking about on this episode today. And so then we walk you through a process of kind of identifying what are the things that I need to do in the next 2 weeks to make progress towards that goal. So I'm going to help you with this, okay? So I'm going to give you the first 2 projects that you want to do. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to go on Amazon or wherever you buy a book, and I want you to buy 4 copies of the book Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans, okay? This is the book that we've been talking about. A lot of the stuff that we've been talking about here comes from that book because those guys have been unbelievably helpful to me, and it's a proven process. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. 4 copies of that. And again, we'll have that in the show notes, and so you can get a link to that and go order 4 copies of that book. That's your first project. The second project is for you to invite 3 other people to go through this journey with you. Now, they're not just there helping you. Like, you're inviting them for them to take that journey alongside you as well. Now, y'all might be working on different parts of your life that you're you're wanting to build, but you're inviting other people. It could be, if you're a pastor, it's other pastors. It could be that if you're in the marketplace, it's other leaders, it's people on your team, just whoever it might be, mentors, friends, 3 people that you know will be with you, but are also curious about their own life. And if you start with those 2 things and just basically follow the process, work through the book together, then you're going to set yourself up super well for 2018. And then you're going to come and you're going to tell stories about how you've just kind of entered into this next season of life by going through that process. What I find in working through this with men and women is it is not uncommon for people to come back to me and go, I now have a plan for the next 5 years of my life. That's not bad, to be able to go, I now have a plan to build the life that I want to live, a life that I think I'm gonna love, because I went through this design process with other people.
And I'm making up how some of our listeners are going to hear that. Not all of our listeners. Many of our listeners hear that and go, man, a 5-year plan sounds awesome. And then there are those of you who are hearing a 5-year plan. Holy crap, that feels oppressive. I don't know if I want a 5-year plan. There's flexibility to this. It's nothing that this is like choosing a vocation in college. We're not going to hold you accountable to it. We're not.
The operative word here is freedom, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's what we're after.
There is freedom here. And I'm telling you, I just through personal experience and experience with a whole lot of clients, planning can be very, very helpful and solid and good, for you. And so, but you may be the type of person that needs some more freedom and flexibility in that plan. We totally get that. So there's no expectation as to, okay, you got to have a 5-year plan and you must work it to the day, or, we're going to have a podcast episode about you and calling out your failure. Right. It's not that. It's not that at all. So relax if you felt that is kind of tension and heavy. This is designed to help you and provide freedom for you. And that's why we're giving you these tools. So we want to encourage you to go to 5factors.net/freedom. Look at exactly what Matt walked you through there. Set some goals, build projects. And the most important thing about that, excuse me, is to lock it onto your calendar. Put it on there. If you don't put it on your calendar, it's probably not going to happen because you'll surrender to the tyranny of the urgent. And so if you're not making progress on what you want to be doing and who you want to be becoming, you're not being productive. So, excuse me. So your life does not define your identity. Your identity defines your life. Matt Adair. Write that down. That's a great quote from the genius and wizardry of Matt Adair. So your life does not define your identity. Your identity defines your life. So remember that. Go to 5factors.net/freedom. Set goals, build projects, put it on your calendar, and then set up for episode 10, which will be forthcoming. So Matt, you got any other closing thoughts?
No, the only thing I would say is this: if you're hearing this and you hear us talking about vocation, you think job, and so I don't really want to change my jobs, I don't need this. It's broader than this. If there's any aspect of your life when you're looking at 2018, your relationships, your physical health, any of the 5 factors we've talked about that you are looking at and going, hey, this needs to change. This process that we're talking about will give you a way to make progress towards where you want to be. So if there's anything that you want to see different about your life, then this book, everything that we've created is there to help you do that. So if it is a job, great. If it's broader than that, cool. I think this is going to help you as well.
Fantastic. So we want to, and man, write your comments, write your questions, send those to us so that we can be dialing this in a way that's really helpful for you as we continue in this journey together. But remember, 5factors.net/freedom, set goals, build projects, put it on your calendar, and then we will see you for episode 10. Thanks so much for listening to the 5 Factors podcast. For Matt Adair and myself, Tal Prince, we will see you next week.